What's up, YouTubers? Oh, I gotta shut that off. Oh, it's telling me I'm going live. I got a notification. That's great. Welcome to my channel. I'm shadow banned to heck for the information we keep providing, but we're breaking through massively on a massive scale. Trump is the first president ever to really talk about the deep state and the UFO file openly, talk about the JFK assassination, talk about the files, why he's afraid to release them. Well, we're in for it tonight, folks. Trump won the election by a landslide because he knew the power of social media. He went on Joe Rogan podcast, and I think that was the breaking point. Kamala Harris wanted to have controlled conversation, only 1 hour, controlled set of questions, and narrative, everything set up, and that was just fake for the American people. Wanted long form, open-ended, anything goes kind of interviews, and that's something Kamala did not deliver on, and that is the main reason why she lost the election, in my opinion. Who is actually running the country right now? It should be Kamala. I mean, she's vice president. Biden stepped down and said that she was a better candidate to run for president. So why isn't she president now? Why hasn't Biden stepped down and made, like we talk about the first woman president, black woman president, and how it is never going to happen. Well, Biden can step down right now and literally create, the first black woman president, just by stepping down and putting her in charge. I mean, obviously, he's been mentally deficient and declining with the jokes that we've been telling about, on this channel about weekend at Biden's, weekend at Bernie's. They're just propping up a dead guy at this point. It's pretty ridiculous. Anyways, who is running the country? Well, this continuity of government program might be one of those things that kind of sits behind what we think is the three branches of government. The three branches of government, of course, completely overgrown and overtaken by this fourth branch of government, which we now know, penetrated the executive branch with folks like Jeffrey Epstein, and penetrated the legislative branch and the judicial branches with corruption in the Supreme Court, and also, our Congress and the courts and the legislative laws, and how bills get passed, and writing junk into bills, and all these senators and congressmen that are kind of corrupt behind the scenes. We got to weed those guys out and figure out who they are, and make sure they do not get reelected. Anyways, Operation. How do we get out of the spiraling $36 trillion in debt? Our interest on our debt just reached $1 trillion. That's what we're paying in just in interest on what we owe. So that's like more than it used to. What used to be $1 trillion back in the 19. I have a graph here which goes into it a little more detail, but. So these are the four main points. We need to address the $1 trillion debt, figure out a way to pay that off, or figure out who the heck we owe that money to, and are these the guys, the COVID criminals and the deep state criminals that are really in power and control of our money and our economy and everything that's going on because of being in control for so long, and crimes that they've committed in the past to get that control, like we'll get into in this presentation. Because if that's the case, then we don't owe $36 trillion, and we can just go and arrest those people, throw them in prison, and redistribute their wealth, which would probably pay off a lot of our problems, and also alleviate that debt. Because I believe it's 13 banking families that set up the Federal Reserve Bank and print all our money and kind of control all that in infrastructure anyway. It's just a few small families. Number two, oil, energy, aging infrastructure. Yes, this is key. We have enough oil to last us till we can get, but we need to focus a lot of our money and on rebuilding infrastructure, and also building new infrastructure for scientific research and purposes, because we could do so much with new science if we donated the money in the right ways to the right places. Physicists could do a lot with, solving energy problems if they were given enough of money was given to research, and a lot of the deep state suppressed research that we've covered and talked about on this channel, and we'll get into in this presentation, hopefully. 3 is the drug problem, including big pharma and other problems. And number 4 is deep state disclosure. Deep state disclosure involves everything we're going to talk about here and more. Trump, of course, some people say, what's going on with Trump is he inviting all these people to his cabinet because, he's reinviting all the Operation Warp Speed people back, and he's repopulating his cabinet, it seems, with all these bad picks again. I thought we were cleaning things up. I thought we were eliminating and changing things and going after a lot of these people for things, they suppressed a lot of channels for talking about certain issues, and certain keywords were blacklisted and other things. They really did a number in the mainstream media, which is funded a lot by big pharma, to trash the word of this man and these other documentaries by, the guy who wrote the foreword to this book here on the left. His documentary got totally banned. He did the best interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson went on Del Bigtree, and that was one of the best debates I ever seen Neil do with where he just was not prepared for the research that he was hit with. This stuff is real. They clip up 4 or 5 second clips of RFK, talking about a brain worm, or admitting to, being addicted to heroin when he was in college, and being, recovering and getting off heroin. And then they'll clip up little things like that and give you 4 minutes of Robert F. Kennedy, and then tell you that he's a nutbag and an I'm not even going to say the word because it's a hot button potato, and I've already gotten interviews that I've done taken down for even talking about this issue, which is ridiculous, because turns out everything I said I was right about on the science and the hypotheses for the origins and everything. So anyways, yeah, this is why I've got sort of passionate about this issue. If you guys want to know, want to go after these people, these people should be arrested on day one. And I think would be a good way to do is appoint them all to positions in the new administration, rehire them, pretend like everything's going good, so that way there's a smooth transition from the Biden regime to Trump, because it looks like Biden wants to start World War III right now with the Ukraine. But hire back on all these people from the Operation Warp Speed. Maybe this is part of the plan, I'm hoping. And then on step 2 is, well, first, but part of step 1 is that, on day 1, all these people show up for work and they just get arrested, right? So these people, all the people from Operation Warp Speed that tricked Donald Trump into pushing that whole agenda forward under the illusionary guise of helping people and saving lives. Those people, when they show up for work, they should be arrested. Realistically, that would be the best way to round them all up and do a safe transition, because if you announce openly before you get the transition of power that you're going to do all this stuff, there's already people that think he's going to do Hitler stuff, and like really he's taking out Hitler, and that the Hitler are like, we're trying to maintain control. I believe that they threw the last election, because of just the numbers and the results don't make sense. But step two is the JFK files, and when the deep state first took control, because that's going to, really expose these people and really reverse a lot of the damage that they did to the executive branch, with that overgrown limb of the fourth branch of government that just took complete control of the executive branch when they blew a hole straight through the front of JFK's head from the grassy knoll, right? And someone who knows all about that and knows all about more than she lets on is a total, liar for the CIA. 85% of the Warren Commission is based on this one lady's testimony. And it turns out her sister works for the CIA. Her brother is deep state, MIC, military industrial complex. He's a Bell helicopter engineer. And her good friend is D. Harold Byrd, who knows LBJ and owns the school book depository building there in Dallas, where Lee Harvey Oswald would get a job and then allegedly shoot the president from while on his lunch break, drinking a Coke. And it's yeah, I'm gonna delete that and I'm ban the user. I don't know who that guy is. Kyle, you suck. The LBJ and the Dallas oil man D. Harold Byrd. Yeah, this is great. So Ruth Paine is actually still alive. She's the last surviving CIA co-conspirator in the JFK assassination. Turns out she was interested in Marina Oswald as a lesbian lover, and also had affairs with Alan Dulles' mistress, which connects her to Alan Dulles and the whole Warren Commission there, of which 85% of that Warren Commission, leaves out all the deep history with the Civil Air Patrol, which was set up, under D. Harold Byrd. Again, Byrd sets up the Air Patrol. He's also cousins with Admiral Byrd there, who the Antarctica explorer, the guy that went to Antarctica and did all the secret missions for the CIA in Antarctica. So deep state, deep CIA connections here to the JFK assassination that were untold, hidden and covered up by the CIA for decades. They only came out thank God, through the internet and through dedicated researchers out there sharing research information and really digging in. And then that file dump that happened under Trump, where he couldn't release all the files, but they released a lot of stuff. And what was in that stuff was telling enough for people to put a lot together on this. Turns out that, Oswald gets recruited into the CIA through the Civil Air Patrol as a young man, right? David Ferry, CIA pilot, recruiting young Oswald, tells him to join the Marines. Oswald joins Marines, gets stationed right out at Siege Air Force Base, where they fly the U-2 flights out of right over the Soviet Union, and then land them at Area 51. So this is Area 51 was where they built the U-2s, and they shipped them inside of C-140s out to at Siege, where they'd reassemble them. They take the wings off in the tail section, and they literally reassemble the plane in a hangar on site. And at Atsugi, fly it over at night secretly to take photos of the Soviet Union. So Oswald goes to Russia. I think they tried to make him a spy, gave up a little bit of intel to the Russians to try to gain their trust. Obviously, the Russians never fully took him in, and he ended up fleeing Russia and coming back to the United States as a failed Russian mole. Has some Russian CIA kind of handlers hanging around him. Ruth Paine being allegedly another one of her handlers. And this whole connection with Ruth Paine and Michael Paine to Bell Helicopter, of course, the deep MIC connections. And D. Harold Byrd founded the Civil Air Patrol, which recruited Lee Harvey Oswald, and then owned the school book depository building where Lee Harvey Oswald will then end up working and allegedly shooting the president from. I think there was something else going on with all of this. D. Harold Bird also owned Vought Aeronautics Division, which made all those flying saucers for the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the 40s, right? You can look that up, the Vought Flying Pancake, this craft right here. Alan Dulles, LBJ, and this is him, getting the Warren Commission, the official, investigation that these, fake lawyers put together on, based on Ruth Paine's, nonsense about Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone and shooting President Kennedy, total cover up. And this guy right here, part of that Warren Commission, would be granted presidency. They helped him become a president. How do you become? You just become president. He helped cover up the murder for the deep state, and he become another one of the leaders of the deep state. So, including Bush, we'll get into that. But Guy Bannister also, when Lee Harvey Oswald came back from Russia, he went to New Orleans, and he was living in New Orleans, working for 4554 Camp Street, doing this anti-Castro Cuban infiltration of the Cuban groups. He would go and hang out at the pro-Cuban meeting and then go to the anti-Castro Cuban meetings. And, he was hanging out both those places. And this guy was the originator of the X-Files, who worked out of that same building with Lee Harvey Oswald there. So there's some interesting, deep X-File connections there, including the tramps that were arrested, who's allegedly Fred Chrisman, who's this very shadowy UFO deep state X-Files kind of guy. Really look into him. The Maury Island incident, he shows up to investigate, and he's already investigating and pretending to work for one government agency, but really he's working for some other government agency, and then somehow teams up with the FBI guys and tells them that then they end up doing other cases together and doing research. It's a weird connection with the Bannister Chrisman, and it's like literally Fox Mulder's nest of FBI investigators, and Lee Harvey Oswald's right there in the middle of it. Really weird. Of course, all this stuff goes back to what happened after the most top secret project in the world. It took us 4 years, 1942 to 1946, to build the first atomic weapon and blast that huge signal out at Trinity tests into the cosmos with all the right frequencies, as a very loud ping to any intelligent life out there that, hey, we've figured out atomic energy and we've reached the nuclear age. So we're probably not far away, maybe another 100 years until we figure out UFOs and flying saucer technology. So I'm pretty sure that if there were intelligent aliens out there, that's the signal they'd be looking for. It's the signal we're looking for. Certainly, we scan the cosmos for that signal, to look for that. That would be a definite sign that there's life out there, right? Seeing nuclear blasts coming from afar, but the whole thing is this project took place in a matter of 4 years, and during that time out at Los Alamos, you bet your ass Oppenheimer talked about UFO activity and UFOs visiting the site and checking things out. So, strange occurrences. And then the biggest UFO incident of all happened right after the Manhattan Project ended, right? The very next year. But the Manhattan Project itself is super classified, and the most classified component of that Manhattan Project was the Demon Core, plutonium core center, and of course the metallurgists and the contractor that had the higher security clearance than the president to work on this and build this for the military and the Manhattan Project. It was none other than Battelle Memorial Institute. which, by the way, they currently manage all of our national laboratories. Amazing, huh? Los Alamos, Idaho, Brookhaven, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge. Yeah, that's all the labs that made the atomic weapons and stuff. And guess what? They're all managed by this super secret quasi-governmental container organization that is private institute that doesn't have to answer to FOIA. And guess what? Aero director Sean Kirkpatrick has ties to Battelle, and so does Pentagon UFO hearing spokesman Ronald Moultrie. So both all the UFO hearings and UAP hearings that we're getting out there are totally like contrived, man. That's wild that we're getting a fake version of disclosure. This whole Aero office is set up to look at UFO videos and analyze UFO videos and figure out what the UFO videos are. And we pretend to the public that that's a serious investigation into what we've been alleging. A deep state attracted UFOs through this project called the Manhattan Project. We brought them here through that project. Don't think they were here, really cared, or really passed by this place much, but that project and lighting off those atomic bombs definitely got their attention. And it was very serious. The first acting CIA director during July 1947, of course, he was, he was the head of the intelligence. And they created the CIA and the NSA and the U.S. Air Force 3 days after Roswell, when all this went down. And the first Secretary of Defense ended up committing suicide. Remember, he pushed out the window in a manner very similar to Frank Olson, the CIA scientist that was allegedly killed by the MKUltra project. And they said, "Oh yeah, we gave him LSD and he jumped out the window." But it goes way deeper if you really dig into it, because he worked on the Rainbow herbicide program for the Agent Orange and all that crazy stuff, and a bunch of other aerial spraying program stuff. So all the original chemtrail warfare stuff started with this guy. Interesting other connections. Yeah, this is Alfred C. Loading. He worked on the Vought aeronautics planes of the 40s and 50s. A lot of flying saucer shaped designs were tested and built by these aircraft companies. You can look that up. Some people believe that this is what crashed at Roswell, that it wasn't indeed an alien flying saucer, but something we were building and testing, possibly a Horton parabola, a Horton Brothers Nazi flying saucer or flying wing type craft. The key parts of the mafia were definitely involved in the Kennedy assassination. So the whole Bay of Pigs thing with that started this all was an army of about 400, 600 CIA agents that were all storming the beach at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba to take back the government from Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro had overthrown Batista and thrown out all the gangsters and all the casinos out of Cuba. So all those gangsters came out of Cuba, were pissed off about. They wanted to go back into Cuba, and they were all in Miami for a while, trying to get back into Cuba and trying to set back the gambling and vacation operation that they had in Cuba for years, up until Fidel Castro took over and shut it all down. So they had sent this army into the Bay of Pigs, hoping that Kennedy would provide air support, and Kennedy failed to provide air support, causing the whole army to die. And there's big mob ties in the government up here in Rhode Island too. I threw that slide in about Providence and the whole mob connections there. But the mobsters basically, they when they couldn't get Cuba back from Fidel Castro, they ended up moving to Las Vegas and opening shop right next to Area 51, right, Las Vegas. So it became a um, also a yeah, it's a very interesting history about the whole thing. So Jack Ruby, obviously the Carousel Club owner, shoots Oswald before he can talk. He says he's a patsy. He starts. They didn't record his discussion with the police interrogators, and they had some CIA agents present with that, and maybe a handler or someone that Oswald knew. So none of that was recorded, and there's no transcript of it anywhere, the interview. And then as he's coming out, Jack Ruby shoots him and kills him before he can talk. And then Jack Ruby's appointed a court-appointed psychiatrist named Jolly West. He gives his last interview to Dorothy Kilgallen, this CBS News reporter, who's going to break the story of the century that she tells her friends. Marilyn Monroe, her best friend, tells her, hey, we're going to break the story of the century. You wouldn't believe, starts gossiping with her about everything she's hearing from Jack Ruby about all this stuff. She's going to tell the world. We probably would have heard about Area 51 and a lot of the UFO cover-up and the secret saucer stuff, and all the Roswell stuff back then, if she hadn't been killed and Marilyn Monroe was killed, and also Jack Ruby gets taken out, and Jolly West turns out that he's also the guy that was running the Tate Ashbury clinic, where they would they gave LSD to the Charles Manson and his group, and did mind control experiments with them, where they got them to commit these murders while under the effects of these drugs that they were giving them. And this was actually a double psychological operation on the American people, because people didn't used to lock their doors that time before then, and after the murders, everybody locked their doors and everyone became scared. And then people tried to replicate this, and it became this, Manson, literally, this idea of the serial killer. They glorified it and made this, I don't know, they made like a whole, I feel like Richard Ramirez and other people, serial killers, exemplified and tried to mimic the, what these people did, in a lot of ways. I mean, you look at the biggest wave of serial killers in history was in the 1970s, which is right after this all happened. So the fact that it did influence it is right there in the data. But anyways, the CIA maybe has more to answer for. In this book, Tom O'Neill, Chaos, is a good one. Thane Eugene Caesar has been identified as a Lockheed Martin Skunk Works security guard who was, taken on as extra security to beef up security at the hotel the night that RFK came to speak there at the Ambassador Hotel. And he was the one that led RFK into the pantry where Sirhan, the hypnotized MKUltra Manchurian candidate patsy, was waiting there with a revolver programmed to shoot RFK when he walked through the door. His revolver only held 6 rounds. They found a total of 8 rounds in the hotel. So as he's leading him into the pantry, he hears Sirhan starts shooting out, grabs RFK, fires a pistol right in the back of his head, poof, poof, 2 shots, and then he falls to the ground. And the autopsy report shows, 2 pistol shots here and here, shot right from down here, scathed his skin and hit him, in the head. Shot right from in a hidden position where it would have been blocked by his body on this side and blocked by RFK's body in the front. So this is trained CIA hitman assassin technique of when RFK goes into the pantry, Sirhan's there waiting, going to start opening fire. You're going to grab RFK from behind and pretend like you're pulling into the floor. And as you pull him to the floor, you're going to get you a little tiny Derringer out and boom, boom, finish him off, make sure the job's really done. And then as you dump him to the floor, you're going to try to secure the, immediately turn around, hand the gun to another waiting CIA agent who was seen grabbing a bag and leaving the area. That's all covered in the movie RFK Must Die by Sean O'Shaughnessy, I think is his name. But yeah, RFK Must Die. If you want to look up the documentary, it's totally totally crazy stuff. Anyways, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works connected security guard. Turns out, he's deeply connected with George Ioannidis at the CIA. Was there that night. Probably the guy that he handed the gun to in the bag, put it right in a paper bag and then carried it out like it was a lunch or something. I seen the guy walking with like a regular paper bag with a gun in it. It's kind of wild. And this is, anybody know who this guy is? Inman. Billy Inman. Right? Deep state control over America since JFK. Well, we all know LBJ took over, and then after LBJ, Nixon took over. Nixon, of course, knew Jack Ruby, was in Dallas when Kennedy is assassinated, and has some still unknown connection or knowledge of all that operation and what's really going on and the real story behind all that. Ford, of course, had to know something. He was part of the cover-up, part of the Warren Commission. Congratulations, you helped us cover up the murder of the old guard, and you're going to be appointed temporary puppet of the deep state. Thank you. Well, people are getting kind of wise to this whole thing with the elections. There was a big controversy with right around this era where the CIA was investigated, and under the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and that was all done under Carter because Carter was they couldn't completely control the electoral process, and they got it with Carter. But then they got the whole actor, propping up the puppet process down with Reagan. Reagan was the first really, totally fake actor president, and he was totally run by George, H.W. Bush who was his vice president, basically running the show behind him, and then becomes president afterwards. So he's really running the country for, a number of years. I think Reagan did 2 terms, but it's pretty wild. Then Bill Clinton gets in charge in the 90s, and of course Bill Clinton is connected to George H.W. Bush through the Mena, Arkansas, and connection, right? So the Mena, Arkansas connection. This is House Select Committee on Assassinations. They appoint an outsider who has no connections prior to the CIA. So they appoint CIA Director George H.W. Bush, and he just is it's totally unknown at that time. This came out later in the JFK files and documents, that George H.W. Bush worked for the CIA prior to becoming director, allegedly to clean up the agency under Carter in 76, right? And but it turns out that Operation Zapata was the code name for the Bay of Pigs invasion, and Zapata Oil, Zapata Offshore, was, of course, George H.W. Bush's oil company. So you have these connections in there that really throw a wrench in the whole thing, and also the fact that George H.W. Bush called the FBI, and reported that he had got some information on who was going to kill someone who was going to kill the president. But this Zapata offshore drilling company out of Houston, Texas, running these offshore oil rigs, which were used as staging platforms for the CIA invasion of the Bay of Pigs. He's connected to these very networks of people that, would have been the ones that killed the president, that would have been the ones that helped assassinate the hit teams that were training to assassinate Fidel Castro from these oil platforms, but were then turned on those rigs. And then, of course, during the Reagan administration and the Bush administration, that whole time, was the crack cocaine explosion and the whole epidemic, where it turns out, these, they were using planes at that time. He invested a lot in these aviation companies and stuff, if you look into it, and they were doing a lot of drug smuggling with Oliver North, and this whole, Colonel Oliver North was, involved heavily with this whole massive, it was connected to, of course, Pablo Escobar. Here's a photograph with Barry Seal and Pablo Escobar loading, bags of cocaine onto his plane. And this was all CIA connected operation. So the South American headquarters for Zapata Oil was in Medellin, Colombia, as well, if you look it up. So, after the 1950s and 60s, with, when Bush is helping the CIA run operations into Cuba, then kill the president in Dallas, through the 70s and 80s, the 80s, and well, not quite, maybe the late 70s when they started, but they got into this whole, the CIA realized that drugs were big money, and if they could get in on the drug business and be part of this drug smuggling thing, they could get massive control over the American people, for one. And these drug laws got so many people locked up. They allowed a massive expansion of the prison systems and the court systems in America, and got so many people put in jail, and really a lot of freedoms taken away for people, where you can the searches that they were able to do under the narcotics and everything, looking for drugs, destroying communities, destroying lives as well. But they're making lots of money that they could spend on illicit activities, this untraceable cash. So that's why they got into a lot of that. And then, of course, let's go back to that president's list. Then, of course, Bill Clinton, you have governor of Arkansas at the time, overseeing the CIA cocaine smuggling operations that were running on Barry Seal's flight path straight into Mina, where his flights would land. Before, that was after they land in Mina, after dropping their load in the Louisiana swamp. So you go back to that flight path. They go to Colombia or down to Nicaragua or Honduras, in this area and then fly from Honduras. He'd fly up, he'd either go to Florida and dump it in the Everglades, or he'd fly over Louisiana and dump it in the Louisiana swamp, and then land in Arkansas, up at Mina, Arkansas, where he knew Bill Clinton and was friendly with the CIA there and would protect him. So then you get into George W. Bush, the second Bush. And shortly after George Bush taking office, we had 9/11, of course, where this is the trailers out in front of the Pentagon during the attack, or shortly after the attack, after the Flight 77 struck into the West Wing over here. This is, if you see on the sign on the fence, and with these trailers out front where there's construction going on, it says AMEC Corporation. Well, you look into AMEC Corporation, there was this whole Pentagon renovation program where $258 million were spent renovating this entire wing of the Pentagon, putting bomb-resistant windows and blast-resistant siding in. And that was the only wing that was attacked, not the North Wing. Very strange. You look into the inside job of 9/11, it was fireproofing upgrades on the floors before, and from 10 years before, from 1990 to 2000, there are a number of fireproofing upgrades on the floors that would later coincide with the planes impacting and where the buildings would fail. People that worked in the buildings, the main tenants, in these buildings, have some very interesting connections, especially the ones that missed work or didn't show up for work that day. They're all mapped out in this graphic here on the right and named. Guys like Stephen Friedman, Craig Stapleton, Jim Pierce, Joseph Kasputis, and of course Jeffrey Greenberg, the CEO of Marsh & McLennan Companies, who is also there next to L. Paul Bremer, of Marsh & McLennan. And L. Paul Bremer, as we know, would go and start the Iraq War. He would be the Iraq occupation governor after 9/11. So these guys that worked in the World Trade Center for Marsh & McLennan, Jeffrey Greenberg, his dad is Maurice Greenberg of AIG, who's the insurance company that insured Larry Silverstein for the whole World Trade Center complex. So it's a one big happy family of CIA-connected deep state operatives that brought you the 9/11 attacks, and including, the security companies that ran security at the World Trade Centers, which allowed those explosives to get in the buildings, that placed the put options on American and United Airlines in the weeks before 9/11, predicting stock failure. After 9/11, of course, the American Airlines and United Airlines stock tanked. So they made a lot of money on that put option bet. But AIG goes back to Cornelius Vanderstar and the whole history of the secret insurance men. You can look into that if it's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down with the secret history of CIA and AIG and how they tie together. Of course, there's some eerie similarities between how the World Trade Centers came down and the Reichstag fire of 1933, that when Hitler burnt down his own buildings to declare war on Poland, blaming it on a Polish immigrant that they had found in an alley who was really just like an MKUltra mentally ill person who they brought before like a mock trial and assassinated and shortly after. But yeah, they burnt down their own building, then blamed it on their enemy, and people were like, "What the hell? What is going on? Why is the building burned down?" So yeah, very similar to what Bush stands over the towers, and tells Americans, we got to go and get these people back, and then starts this whole war, which Dick Cheney and his buddies all profited from massively. With Halliburton and the oil that was over in Iraq, that they kind of secured a lot of the contracts for rebuilding the infrastructure and gaining control of those oil fields and reserves, and also the whole lots of other industries that they sold a lot of, especially the technology, because again, the Carlyle Group was a big funder in military industry, and where Osama bin Laden's son and Bush's father were meeting apparently on Carlyle Group business on 9/11. And so Carlyle Group ties back again to Ling Tecmo and D. Harold Byrd of the Kennedy assassination, because LTV, of course, Temco Vout was bought out by the Carlyle Group. If you can look that up. So again, the deep state threads through all this kind of stuff, going way back. This is steel from the World Trade Center showing this slag melted into it. These are these gray red layer, bilayered chips that were found in the World Trade Center dust and analyzed by scientists. And it turns out that this is a aluminum and iron oxide stoichiometric nanostructured mixture, which ignites like thermite. It's basically like thermite paint. You spray one layer and you spray another layer, and it makes like thermite paint. Very interesting stuff to be in the World Trade Center dust after the towers came down, especially with the damage that we see in the FEMA report, Appendix C, written by Dr. Jonathan Barnett, a fire engineer who analyzed steel pieces from World Trade Center 7, the only metallurgical study ever to be done on World Trade Center steel, which shows evidence that steel was melted. On 9/11, the tech billions of spent on technology, 7.3 billion. We estimate we spend about Americans spend ourselves about 487 billion on tech in 2021. I'd estimate that the U.S. government spends about 5 times that on technologies that are completely hidden from us and we'll never know about, we'll never have access to, we'll never be able to buy or spend our money on. So UFOs or UAPs, well, there's these hearings, which are run by Battelle insiders and counterintelligence specialists, people that pretend to be the big heads of these major UFO programs and say that, yeah, this guy's the head of the real program and we're going to bring disclosure. And he wasn't the head of anything. He's actually was the head of counterintelligence. And he said that he was going to apply those skill sets to the UFO community. And now here he is running these congressional hearings alongside this doofus who recycled 30 years old propaganda on element 115 being the key to anti-gravity, which came from, Scientific American magazine, May 1989 issue, if you really look it up. And a lot of the other stuff came from a guy named John Lear, who was a CIA pilot and said on the record with George Knapp in 1987, when said pretty much the whole Bob Lazar story verbatim, before Bob appeared on the scene and repeated it back to him, saying, yeah, it's all real. I worked there and it was legit. Bob gets a job out there a month after he meets Lear while working for Gene Huff, holding a tape measure and doing photo processing for his house appraisal business. And John Lear needs a appraisal on his house. According to the story, you can look it up. I documented it all. But this is the story that gets told to the public. This is the hearings. We got Grush, counterintelligence guy, and Lou Elizondo, a counterintelligence guy. And then these two pilots here, Fravor and Graves. Graves, of course, went to work for BAE after, right after coming out as a whistleblower and leaving the military. He's working for the Electronics Warfare Department, which is, spoofing and the whole division of the military, which creates fake UFOs and spoofs UFOs. And he's in these, hearings telling people that these are aliens and that they're way out of this world. I don't quite buy it. I wanted to interview him. He refused to do an interview with me. He actually quit his job at BAE and went and worked for another company, Quantum Technologies or something out in California, after we had called him out on that a number of years ago. And he said that, he wasn't very happy, that it's hard for him to find employment, and that, it's, I don't know. It's these guys, I don't know what's going on with them. We've got, these hearings just seem like a whole bunch of crap to cover up for technologies that we have replicated or we have hidden from the American people. Whether we reverse engineer it from aliens or not, we have the capabilities to do, everything on these 6 observables lists and more, with technologies that I'm going to cover right here, that we've covered extensively, and scientists come on and are welcome to come on and talk about. We try to get more scientists who worked on these programs and know information to come on and talk all the time. And I just, I also interview them on my channel if I can find them, and other people that I find interesting, or people that are super knowledgeable and have done tons of their research great research of their own into deep state matters. So try to get that information compiled and together. Yes, this can happen. This is an appeal to authority fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. It's an appeal to majority or appeal to authority. Every one of those people can be wrong and you can be right. It's happened before. Galileo, Einstein, so yeah, never go full David Wilcock though. You can't just, watch one YouTube video and take on all of science, and you have to actually have some real science backing you, and that just defies the authority. And a lot of times they'll shut you up for it if it's really one of those things. They'll silence you. So Edward Mills Purcell was one of the first scientists to be recruited and hired by the CIA to work on a lot of these top secret programs out at Area 51. Developed NMR with Felix Bloch back in 1946, won the Nobel Prize for that. And NMR was a key technology at the time, and they thought it could be used for invisibility. If you could manipulate these orbital spins of the atoms, you could do crazy things with their optical responses and capabilities. So he came up with this formula for a radar cross section, 4 pi r squared times the surface, I think it's the surface area over the the scattered power density over the power density intercepted by target. So this you try to minimize the scattered power density and maximize the power density intercepted by the target. So you want to absorb that power with your materials to make this bottom term bigger. And you want to scatter as much of it to make that top term bigger, right? That's pretty much the formula they used and the physics that they used to work on these technologies. And I think one of the first examples of what they were trying with the USS Eldridge was the Philadelphia experiment, where they gave disinformation and counterintelligence and told rumors about, invisibility and teleportation and people getting fused in the ship and weird stuff. I don't believe that stuff happened. I don't see evidence for that. So something like that would have come out. I feel I think that was, especially with the research that I did into that, going down to Clarksburg, West Virginia, to visit the Gray Barker Museum and Archive, talking to the curator there about the Philadelphia experiment and the work that he had done on unmasking the true identity of Carl Allen, or Carlos Allende, the guy that wrote all this nonsense that's been the crazy stories that have been repeated because they're the wildest and weirdest ones. And that's what people are into. And that's what sells the History Channel and the books and all that stuff. Even though I really believe this was just an early experiment with Tesla coils or inductor coils for transmitter antennas, and ways to try to de-Gauss or make the ship invisible to radar. Radar jamming systems, like these are like HARP and stuff, the woodpecker and other things like this. They're radar jammers. And it turns out geometry plays an important role in jamming radar too, with the CIA's Project Rainbow and what they were able to develop with this wallpaper, as it's called, the anti-Soviet radar coating designed for the U-2 spy plane, but they were rejected and thrown out because it made the plane too heavy and just blew off, and the cardboard didn't react well to the the freezing and condensation temperatures up in the upper atmosphere on those really high altitude flights. So this is a United States frequency allocation table. There are if you get a big one of these, you can get the big maps of these. They're really cool to look at. And you'll note that there are certain spectrums which are, sealed off for the military and other things. That's super interesting what those frequencies are. Some of them are important. Some of them are not. Some of them are just communications channels for different things. One thing that is important is this is a slide from T.T. Brown. Thomas Townsend Brown was one of the top government scientists to work on anti-gravity and a lot of this stuff in the early days, 40s and 50s and stuff. The Fred Dunham story is an interesting story about Area 51 and a bunch of people who worked there that got really sick from breathing in materials where they just try to destroy evidence of what they were building and working on out there by throwing it in a big giant burn pit and burning it all. And the smoke it made was really toxic and really bad. And it contained a lot of barium because barium titanate was one of the paints that they used to paint the stealth plane to make it more radar absorbent, to jack up that SR, that ST or ST term on the bottom there, right? Creating the first invisibility cloaks with metamaterials. This is an interesting company called Fractal Antenna. They presented at the Cold Fusion Conference in 2014 at MIT that I covered, and I just think it's fascinating the work that they've done, and John Pendry and some of these others have done with metamaterial invisibility cloaking, and also sound optical, and they make sound cloaks. And the U.S. Navy has actually funded and invested a lot of money in investigating these sound dampening, soundproofing, acoustic metamaterials. They're acoustic metamaterials. Nicholas Fang is one of the scientists who's done a lot of interesting research on this and publications on it. And in Ontario, Canada, is actually the Echo Noise Control Technologies has this big dome with noise cancellation, where it's literally the quietest place on the planet. And then there's a quieter chamber in here, which is super quiet damped. Is inside this room is the quietest place on earth, and I think it's like on an air table, so it's isolated, and apparently you go crazy if you go in here for too long, because the silence is so deafening that it just drives you nuts or something. I don't know. I don't think that's the same for everyone. It might be more psychological than a physical thing, but it's interesting what they're able to do. And kind of like the seashell effect, you put your ear to a seashell and you can hear like this amplified air noises, like it sounds like wind blowing around. It sounds like a whole air current, because it's literally amplifying all the air, creating a really, and it does it through metamaterials, because it's a chiral metamaterial. The spiral inside the shell of the hollow chamber actually creates, the perfect, echo chamber. And that's why your ear has this spiral chamber in it for the hearing, and also so it can siphon off the different frequencies. So the hairs, the hairs on the inside are more higher frequency than the lower frequency hairs that go to the outside. So it separates them off nervously by sort of tapering off the frequencies within that chiral design, the geometry it's in there. Anyways, chiral metamaterials are super interesting. They can polarize light in very weird directions. And Pendry is definitely an interesting guy. Won't talk much. Very quiet. Definitely involved with a lot of classified stuff at Porton Down over there in the UK, which is the British Area 51. So, but his research is nonetheless interesting. And also the fractal antenna stuff, super interesting with these invisibility cloaks. There's this quantum stealth light and bending material, really interesting. This is a projector. They just use the idea of projecting what's behind you onto the front of you. This is just green screen magic, which isn't real invisibility. It's just green screen. Another interesting way to distort light or make yourself invisible or make you look like something else that you're not, make it just compress you down to a blurry UFO saucer-shaped object or whatnot, would be to use, this Fata Morgana effect with temperature inversion, mirage effect. And I have that video that I show. You can look that up. It's mirage effect hides objects. Researchers use mirage effect to cloak objects. And that's an interesting technology in and of itself, because you could, at certain angles with certain frequencies of light, make yourself invisible. And as you can't see it, but I have a whole list of sources on other invisibility stuff. Also, active camouflage, like the adaptive active camouflage technology used by the stealth tanks that are being produced right now by BAE Systems. Very interesting. They kind of like for these drones and the warfare technology going on over in Ukraine right now, they can make the tank look like something it's not. Pretty interesting stuff. But again, invisibility is not, even the metamaterials, invisibility is not proof, isn't completely stealth proof. Stealth isn't, they have counter stealth technology. China, this is a Chinese counter stealth phaser radar array. They use photon entangled pairs to match, to see if the entanglement breaks. And if there's a breaking in entanglement, supposedly it detects some stuff that isn't there. But other reasons things break entanglement too. So there's a lot of false positives apparently with the technology, and they shut it down in the US and haven't used it, even though the Chinese apparently really developed it to a whole nother level. They've shut down the quantum radar research in the US for a couple reasons that they cite. But maybe one is that they've opened up the skies to UFOs that are using invisible, were previously invisible. Now we can see them all, and that kind of scared the radar operators or the people watching, and we're like, oh, there's all this invisible stuff flying around. What the hell is going on? Maybe that's another reason they shut it down, according to some of my sources and theories on the matter. But 1957 quantum gravity meeting in Copenhagen with a lot of interesting guys that were there. A lot of GR literature contributors in the 1950s. But then there's this secret college where they have a whole bunch of a secret meeting with all these scientists at the University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And Richard Feynman shows up there under the pseudonym Mr. Smith. So something secret's going on when Richard Feynman's there pretending to be Mr. Smith. Pretty wild stuff. These guys would write the Battelle Rencontres in the 60s and really set up a lot of the defining foundations of modern theoretical physics, and string theory came out of this stuff. So with Lewis Witten's work and all this string theory stuff. So there's a lot of speculation that these guys were given access to deeper physics, a secret college with the real physics, and that they sold the public a disinformation, fake version of physics that is taught in the universities and that people would pursue with their PhDs, so that they could waste as much of their time as possible with nonsense, and that they'd never really discover real important and intriguing physics. So they would just be lost inside the maths or something. It's really a crazy. I mean, physics is not easy. It gets kind of crazy and hard when you get into all that quantum gravity stuff and really get into what Bryce would do it and even the stuff that Richard Feynman was doing with the path integral formulation and his whole approach to quantum mechanics with QED and all that. It's really there's maybe something more going on with how I really think that he did the calculations some other way, and that the QED stuff was almost like some of that's like almost like nonsense that they teach the. I mean, it works. I guess it's one way to do it. I guess shut up and calculate. Some of the stuff works, but then the string theory stuff was just a whole step in the wrong direction. And what happened with Herman Bondi and the whole sticky bead stuff, and then he, did his he taught Joseph Weber. Joseph Weber does his PhD on this sticky bead stuff, and just they based all the LIGO detectors is based off of his whole idea and stuff. So anyways, lots of laser stuff also in the 50s and 60s that's still classified. They tried to build bigger and bigger lasers. Then of course you build two lasers and you cross the beams, or you point them directly at each other and you try to break the Schwinger limit. Like, so that this is all stuff that they wanted to try to do and focus a lot of money and effort on. They were trying to break physics, and there was and also break gravity. Project Outgrowth, 1972, with Robert Forward, and a lot of these guys, coming out of the woodwork to try to build anti-gravity and stuff, the Q division stuff with this nonlinear optics. And then the phased four-wave mixing with the phase conjugation I learned about in Paula Violette's book, with these metamaterials that they're using with Biefeld-Brown stuff. Again, trying to use these barium titanate and metamaterials with the phase conjugation to for propulsion. Wild stuff. And then you look into what they did with the microwave beam propulsion and the research that was done with those old Navy lasers, during the 80s with Lake Marabou and John Lewis, who wrote this magnificent book, which was declassified. It was set to be declassified in 17th of October 2025. So it wasn't set to be declassified till next year. But they published it and got it declassified, and yeah, so this is going to come out next year. A lot of the stuff's going to get declassified, even though a lot of it came out in this book, which was only available in Canada. They bought out all the copies, and it was like $2,000 a copy, because they went and literally bought out all the copies to suppress the information. It's nuts. And then, but we got it in the right hands to a lot of people that were interested in the technology, making sure that it didn't die. But this kind of stuff's crazy, because they use directed energy. They used to blast it from a laser on the ground and then do these tests on this dish thing. And then they've scaled it up where they actually have the laser on board the craft, where it's projecting this stuff in front of it. And they blast the air with so much energy that it causes supercavitation, and so they're falling through a supercavity, a vacuum. And then this technology is, of course, what's been applied on all the ICBMs to the nose cones of the ICBMs, so that they can go Mach 10 and hypersonic. By blasting the air in front of them and creating these supercavitated vortices in front of the craft, you eliminate all the air resistance, and so you can get super high speeds. And this is all classified stuff, or was classified, I'm not citing any classified sources, though. This is all unclassified or declassified sources that I'm citing, so I can talk about this without getting arrested. But you try to talk about this on mainstream media, they won't let you. And even when I talk about it here on YouTube, get heavily shadow banned and shut down, and get your channel out just locked up in the algorithm for mentioning and talking about these types of technologies, how these laser based flows with the directed hypersonics and this stuff, you can blast these flows onto the surfaces of other aircraft wings and control the other aircraft remotely. You can control a vehicle's flight path, so they could be using the space satellites to control the flight paths of these spy balloons and other balloons really easily with this technology, with the laser based flow technology. We talked about that, like using this technology to steer around aerogels or other types of balloon craft. Now, ECCM technologies are a whole nother thing. We talked a little bit about that, but this guy, I interviewed the head of Area 51 Special Projects Manager, T.D. Barnes, who worked for he's head of the Roadrunners International Organization of former Area 51 employees. These are all legit guys that legit worked out there. He says Bob Lazar never worked out there. He knew all the guys that worked out there. He talks about how they all lived in the same neighborhood, and they all owned boats and boated on the same lake. That the CIA literally hired 20. They hired like 20 or 30 guys that all liked boating and were all into dogs or something. They picked something that they were all into, and they picked 20 guys that all had that in common. They bought out every house in the neighborhood, and they all put them all in the same lot together, so that all their neighbors would all be their same guys who were all, so that everyone would be cool with each other and be friends, but everyone would understand they couldn't share what they were working on or getting out. So everybody knew each other. Bob Lazar wasn't one of those guys. And he talks that was very key to understanding how the CIA set these sort of communities up for the deep intelligence that and the work that went on in these super classified areas like Area 51. And it also just destroys the idea that Lazar ever worked out there at all. And also he destroys Ryan Graves and all these other guys saying, what these pilots are seeing is ECCM technology, whether they know it or not. And basically called these guys out. So, yeah, different perspectives. People say that, oh, TD Barnes is CIA and he's full of shit and he's deceiving you and you got tricked by him. Yeah. All right. Maybe I did, dumbass. I don't think so. I'm into way more shit than real experts to know. That guy's legit. And then these boundary layer pressure balloons where they can control the altitude with this remotely, using a lithium cell and this data transmitter and these overpressure transducer. Electric powered flight goes back to 1913 with Luigi Rota and Edward Farrell. Look this stuff up on Rex Research and other places. These dudes were legit doing it, doing experiments with it. MIT built one of these planes, and of course, we all know these things aren't powerful enough really to lift a human being. NASA Echo and Pagios balloon satellite programs, these could be mistaken for UFOs, but were put up into space. So there might be other balloons and other projects like these going on. There's, of course, these small spheres could be responsible compared to the Mosul sphere UFO caught on camera. Yeah, so there's these types of craft. Of course, the DRFM technology and the radar reflector balloons are kind of what these pilots described seeing. They said they saw a sphere with a cube inside of it, right? Well, that's what this thing looks like, the airborne radar reflectors. And here's the U.S. patent, which you can trace back to 47. These things have been around where they have these radar reflector balloons, and they pop one, and then they immediately inflate another one to make it look like the object teleported on radar, so they can make the thing look like it did 90-degree turns at breakneck speeds, and they can spoof radar, all that stuff, which really puts a hole in a lot of this. There's tons of these bullet. This is a bullet airship, man. This thing looks very much like the Tic Tac. This was developed right around the same time. It was operational from 2008 to 2018, and it was based out of San Diego, California. So this thing is a very possible explanation for what the Tic Tac could be. Not saying that's what it is, but definitely some interesting similarities worth looking into. Nikola Tesla has some patents on UFOs and stuff from the 28 and stuff. Of course, people have always talked about Nikola Tesla being involved in a lot of these early projects to build one for the military and the government. Don't know if any of that was ever successful. We probably wouldn't know about it if it was, but it doesn't seem like it. A lot of this stuff is stuff we've tried and replicated, and it's not with a lot of success and not with like remarkable results where you're like, yeah, we can go right to space right now. And Elon, why isn't Elon using this? Oh, there's reasons. So, yeah, the Bonson Labs funded a ton of anti-gravity research in the late 1950s with T.T. Brown. We don't know where that research developed into or where it went in the 60s, really, but it definitely went somewhere. John Lear was there. John Lear's dad, William Powell Lear, Bill Lear. So John Lear's father, who was actually, knew about a lot of this top secret research that was going on at the time. And this is the ARV, which of course, Mark McCandless said this was a alien reproduction vehicle that they built and had out at Buckley Air Force Base. Was it not Buckley? The one in Ohio there. Anyways, they said the ion winds thing. We did the experiment. Thomas Townsend Brown, Martin Tajmer said it's ion wind. The ESA said it's ion wind, and we got results recently, which made some headlines. You know what? I gotta bring that up. Let me see this. Falcon Space. Did you guys see this thing? This is I don't know if you can hear Mark talking, but this is the setup that he built and that we tested for the Biefeld Brown effect thruster. These are similar. These are based on Charles Bueller, the NASA scientist who came forward last Christmas. So I'm hoping we get some good Christmas presents this year, and that some more stuff comes forward. It's been a year since that, and it took us that long to really build and get all this stuff set up to reproduce it, at a lot of expense to all of us on the team. So this is amazing. Some point we're going to get Mark on and dig into this and really talk about it. Once we can perfect it and work out all the bugs, we're going to get Jesse Michaels to come out and maybe think about granting us the prize if we get a good if we meet his criteria. So that would be awesome. Of course, he did that documentary on American Alchemy on Thomas Townsend Brown. If you want to learn more about the whole Thomas Townsend Brown thing, and also check out the Charles Bueller stuff on APEC and NASA. Um, but there's a ton of classified, interesting physics. That's, people have tried anti-gravity. Tons of people have, worked on anti-gravity or tried anti-gravity all throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s. We've documented a lot of it, the DARPA stuff, the Boeing research with Mike Gamble and the guys that worked on this stuff that have, come forward to talk about their research. And there's other people. If you got better ideas, man, like, get on board and get on the team. And DARPA's handing out contracts and money for good ideas and good research. So you want some funding, come up with a proposal and come with the team and learn how to put that kind of stuff together. And there's work out there, man. There's lots of stuff to be done. There's lots of ideas to be explored. There's lots of ideas that have been explored that need to be thrown away and we don't have to worry about and we can move on from. So there's lots of deep history. Yeah, gravitational control research, John T. Watson. There's so much compartmentalized and different people that worked on different stuff. A grad student would write a paper on this, and then he'd get scooped up by some, business, or like the CIA would create a shell company just to fund his research or temporarily, and keep it compartmentalized from this other group company, or these other aerospace companies would come in and scoop this thing up and do research on it. Boeing did this whole research into the Alzaphan NMR idea, EPR idea of electromagnetic gravity manipulation, which Mark and a lot of others have tried to replicate and dig into and see if just research themselves to see if it worked. There's also ideas about superfluidity and using superfluids, and also the idea of using ferrofluids and superfluids, or whether, we talked about all that, the whole TR3B magnetic vortex engine. Apparently there was this Kecksburg crash with this thing that looked similar to a Nazi bell. The Nazi bell was allegedly this Project Kronos, or this Nazi experiment where they rotated mercury that was on mercury plasma, which mercury glows when you run electricity through it, and is used in a lot of high depth, high intensity discharge bulbs, mercury vapor bulbs. So produces really intense, bright white light, and it's also magnetic. Moves around when you magnetize it, so you can spin it. So interesting stuff. There's a lot of theories that mercury was used to build anti-gravity, or that it wasn't actually mercury, it was red mercury, this other version of mercury that was had some kind of isotopically thing done to it, or had something doped into it or added to it, which made the mercury special. Like Ed Fouché said, it was doped with barium and a number of other strange elements to give it other properties. Whether what those are, not sure, but yeah, Bryce DeWitt wrote papers about superconductors and gravitational drag. So this was in 1966, no less. So the whole godfather of a lot of this and government anti-gravity research is writing about using superconductors and gravity back in 66, which is, of course, decades before the Podkletnov experiment and the whole Boeing attempt to use superconductors to affect gravitational fields and measure the gravitational effect of a rotating superconductor, which yeah, fascinating classified research that was done. And then Ning Li, of course, the whole controversy over her and whether she disappeared and went to work for China. And then, well, now she's dead, but she died in Huntsville. So she didn't go to China. She's been living in Huntsville. She maybe went to China to visit family and stuff, but she didn't move there or go to work for the Chinese government on UFO technology or take American UFO secrets and bring them to China or any of the crazy rumors that I watched some of the documentaries and stuff that they get millions of views for people talking about Ning Li and they have no idea, that David Noever and Douglas Torr work with her and or that she got a lot of her ideas from a grad student at the I talk about the grad student and I don't have his name right now off the top of my tongue, but a lot of the research and work was done by him, man. So there's a whole bunch of nonsense. The de Broglie wavelengths of light, basically everything's got this wavelengths. Everything in nature has wavelengths, and they're all just waves, man. We're coming through in waves, and there might be ways to affect those waves and align them topologically with these topological physics is apparently the whole key to it all, and understanding knot theory and connected nodes and this whole ways that nodes are connected with quantum spin might have something to do with things too. Breaking entanglement, for example. Like, want to break quantum entanglement? If you can break all the entanglement, you can disentangle, and you basically put on Frodo's ring, and you're now in the shadow realm and in this invisible world that's disconnected from possibly everything, including gravity. UFOs have dropped these metals. This is a CIC artifact. It was dropped in Denmark from this case. UFO dropped it. Military recovered it. They didn't know what to do with it. It eventually wound up through a chain of custody in the hands of Battelle Memorial Institute, where who knows where it is now, but apparently this is the Bob White artifact too right here. Apparently they use metals, and there's some kind of process going on where they're releasing energy through a fusion reaction, cold fusion type reaction, and that's how they're powering the craft. Not sure if this is legit or not. This whole thing came from Hal Puthoff and TTSA and this whole counterintelligence operation and stuff. Terahertz technology is definitely used to see through stuff. The terahertz wave technology is like this, the body scanners that they use in the airports to scan through you. A lot of that stuff was developed by SAIC, CIA connected defense contractors and stuff. They're deeply connected with 9/11 as well, but as you look into, but SAIC would know about the terahertz technology if anyone, and they would have the capabilities to test this stuff to see if it floats. Also, Wright-Patterson, the ultra-fast photonics lab, might have the terahertz technology. So I like to encourage Jared and those guys to reach out to maybe get our piece and sample of this stuff tested non-intrusively with terahertz, just to see what happens. But again, this whole thing could be disinformation and a distraction and a ruse, and a lot of wasted effort in building a terahertz source to test this stuff if it doesn't work. So I don't know about that whole thing. I really sketched out about Hal Puthoff and a lot of those guys, even though Puthoff's been on the right side and on to some stuff, man. I think there's, better free energy guys, better cold fusion guys. There's better anti-gravity guys out there. It's not just, Puthoff. even though he had a super high security clearance and wrote all these papers with Eric Davis and there were, on teleportation and all this crazy physics and stuff, man. None of it matters if you can't produce it and replicate it and experimentally build it and do it, which some of the stuff, of course, there's a barrier to entry. But the metals are cool. I know Jacques Vallée has saved a bunch of them from crash sites that he's been to personally. This cavitation on the metals, it looks like supercavitation, which could be transmutation and fusion in one. This supercavitation effect on propellers will actually leave them pitted and destroys the metal. Very similar to what we see on those artifacts if they're doing some kind of supercavitation to create EVOs, which would then produce energy through fusion. A lot of the scientists that worked on cold fusion, man, this was the 2014. This is 10 years ago. So a lot of these guys are like dead now. I was so glad to have attended that conference and got interviews with many of them. Wish I had done more, but apparently the predictor of the success, these were the MIT and Caltech replications that failed to produce cold fusion and are used by the patent office to deny patents on cold fusion and used by debunkers and scientific community to call cold fusion crackpots and lunatics and say that it's not real. Turns out you need about a 97 to 98% loading efficiency is preferred in order to get success. So that's when you get cold fusion right here at this spike, and you need the right loading ratio. Too high or too low, you're just not going to see anything, and you're going to get false negative results. So there's a lot on cold fusion. Edmund Storms has some models. There's also models with reverse Bremsstrahlung radiation, like Peter Hagelstein talks about, where you're basically distributing a large gamma over a very wide series of phonon nodes, so that you don't get these large gammas out that should have killed Pons and Fleischmann had they produced real cold fusion in the lab. Oh, they're not getting killed by gammas because it's photonic. It's phononic. The excitation that it gives off will literally break down through reverse Bremsstrahlung radiation into a bunch of small vibrations distributed over a lot of lattices, a large lattice structure. There's metamaterials, mechanical metamaterials being developed and built. Can imagine what these are going to look like in the future with, nanometals and whatnot. I think this is these. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. This terahertz gap is certainly interesting. That there's like a gap there in the frequency band, the terahertz range. That's fascinating. That it's implies that there's maybe something in there that connects physics somehow. Is that where the gravitational field lies inside the? It's according to Puthoff, might be. He certainly talks up about that terahertz gap, and the terahertz technology is a wild place because that's right. That's the gap between photonics and electronics. That's the spintronic realm, right? That's your whole terahertz spintronic technology realm. So those, again, the spintronics and dealing with those spins of the atoms might have something to do with anti-gravity. Boeing certainly thought so with the Alciphon experiments and all that. And a lot of others seem to at least want to entertain that path, thinking it could be worth it. These types of mirrors are always cool. I think that this is very similar to how the Bremsstrahlung radiation works, reverse Bremsstrahlung effect, kind of visualized or exemplified. classified technology related to this terahertz stuff for sure. Isaac Kemp did a year in prison. You can look him up. He was part of this Wright State the terahertz and ultra fast photonics lab, and he got caught bringing some documents home from work, got arrested, served a year in federal prison for it, man. Not sure if he works back there, if they ruined his career completely or what he does or what's going on, but I would love to talk to you, Isaac, if you're out there, if anyone knows Isaac out in Fairborn, Ohio, or near Wright State. We'd love to talk to you. Not sure I can pay you much or help you out much with, but crap, I've read your papers. You wrote all these PhD thesis paper on, terahertz imaging for aerospace. This is like the see-through stuff. This is crazy because this is what SAIC did with all their airport scanners that they sold after 9/11. They're seeing through paint, seeing through buildings, seeing through your clothing to see if you got a gun under your jacket, your trench coat. Crazy stuff, man. So again, this presentation was adapted for a different, so some stuff's blacked out, but I talk about quantum computing, these photonic supercomputers that apparently the stuff that they discovered at Roswell, these hyperdimensional crystals, which are connected through fiber optics and other means to compute at light speed using photonics and spintronic quantum processing, nanocomputers and stuff, and 3D, 5D data storage. Like they've developed a lot of this stuff, but I think that the alien technology has got to have it on another whole nother level, man. If we got stuff from UFO from Roswell that's legit alien that's hanging around at Patel or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I can just only begin to imagine, the type of technology that would hold and how complicated that stuff would be to build if it really did come from a million year or 100,000 year advanced civilization. I mean, we're just catching up on the technology that we're learning about here. But these spin glasses and the condensed matter physics is really interesting stuff with the strange metals. Strange metals you can make by punching a bunch of holes in a sheet of YCBO. So you get a superconductor sheet and you perforate it, and suddenly it's topologically equivalent to a extremal black hole. Well, you got a black hole. You make the surface of your craft a black hole. You get Dirac holes and Dirac cones all over the surface of your ship. You might be able to produce some negative mass, negative energy states. So crazy stuff. I don't know. I've heard lots of stuff from the physicists and people that I've talked to in the black world, dying for somebody to have a major breakthrough and us to release it to a wider scale, finding answers and building the future. Yeah, come and join us, man. We're digging into all these scientists who worked on this, trying to interview as many of them as we can, getting the ideas out there, talking about it, getting the information out there to the people through the APEC conference. You can look up a lot of these talks on these things, a lot of these technologies and stuff. So love to get Len Howe on. That would be great, but I don't know. Victor, hard to get a hold of him. Jack Sarfati, got to get him back on. He's back from London now, so we got to get Jack back on at some point. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys, because we could get into the flying donut pulses. I think this has a lot to do with UFOs, maybe, or at least those effects. Some of those effects we've been seeing. But the vortexes of light and spinning light around in a circle or spinning superfluids around in a circle is definitely something I would like to try and experiment with, just to test out and see what happens. Can you pump massive energy into that stuff, and what happens? In any case, guys, it's been an hour and 40 minutes. Let's I want to shut that down, remove that. Let's open it up to some questions, man. I haven't been paying attention to the chat, and I'm gonna go and guys, throw me some questions in all caps if you want me to talk about anything else in more detail, or have any questions about specifics and stuff, or anything you really need me to know. Like, say, hey, Jeremy, you need to look into this. This is insane. Check this out. Please post it in the comments below. We're gonna get all this everything covered, man. What do you guys think, man? What do you think of my my 10-step, 12-step plan for Donald Trump to take over here? Let's go over the 12-step plan last before I end the stream real quick, just so we can cover this. All right, here's the 12-step plan. I got it copied over here. Oh. Yeah, world history in an hour and a half, all the deep state history, man. We covered a lot, man. Here we go. So, step number one on my list here, you can read that. Step number one would be to hire all the deep state criminals to top White House and Trump administration positions, starting with the Operation Warp Speed guys. We hire them all, and then as soon as they show up for work on day one, that way we assure there's a smooth transition of power. We say that, like, they think that everything's going cool. He's in on it. There's nothing, nothing fishy. Trump is just gonna go along with everything. It's gonna be all right. And then on day one, when they all show up for work, they get arrested and thrown right in prison. All their phone calls recorded, just like special prosecutors hired and set up to do all this. Okay. Also, you should call the Dallas police, and I think everyone should call the Dallas police and make sure that Ruth Paine is arrested on day one as well. Ruth Paine needs to be arrested on day one. She is key to the JFK assassination. I think if she's thrown in a jail cell and really pushed through it at her age, she's gonna crack and tell everyone what she knows. I would almost assure it. There's got to be people at Dallas police that are associated with CIA still. Those people need to be rounded up as well. The JFK assassination is key to that whole thing, so that needs to be a big start. Those files need to come out immediately. Step 3, I would say, the best way we can fund all the stuff that we want to do. So Trump wanted to build a border wall. He wants to deport all the immigrants, right? But where's he going to get the money to do all that? I mean, we can stop the Ukraine war and all the money we're sending to the Ukraine and use it for that. No, it's still not enough. There's still going to be problems. So a good way to get that money is to do what they did to Alex Jones, right? Where we said he's spreading dangerous misinformation and we need to sue him for, all this money to give back to the victims of his disinformation. And then they sued him out of oblivion, and although they still didn't take InfoWars, they were supposed to take it, but he had Dark Journalist on InfoWars today. I don't know if you all were watching that earlier. It was supposed to be at 1:00, and I literally waited around for 2 hours before he finally came on at 3, and it was like, oh God. But anyways, what they did to Alex Jones is key, man. They took all his assets away, and they're using that they want to pay back the victims of his disinformation. So, boom, we do the same thing to Bill Gates. We seize Bill Gates's company assets, just like they did with Alex Jones. Do the same to Microsoft and all his massive land shares and his big super mosquito engineering laboratories down in Florida. And just like the courts did to Infowars.com, we can take all of Bill Gates's money, and then we'll use Bill Gates's money to fund all this stuff that Trump wants to do and says he's going to do, but he doesn't have the money or the means to actually do. Well, if you seize all of that money, you would. Now, the remaining members of the deep state, it's going to be difficult, because you're going to have to arrest Dick Cheney, Paul Bremer. Trump's going to have to arrest his former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who talked him into the whole January 6th fiasco. And Bernard Kerik, who is also very instrumental in banging the drums towards January 6th. The January 6th criminals, alongside Pelosi, Pence, and the FBI provocateurs at that rally who started that whole thing, they need to be arrested and prosecuted as well. Rudy Giuliani definitely needs to be part of that, and he's connected to the whole 9/11 deep state operation. He's the guy that came out and said no explosives were used in conjunction with the investigation. So, or he deferred that question to Bernard Kerik, and Bernard Kerik was the one who actually answered that on the record. So, yeah, we need a full-scale investigation into those guys. We also need a full-scale investigation into the Battelle Memorial Institute and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to determine if the Army Aeromed Lab stories of alien bodies are true or not, along with the rumors of a blue room. So, is there a blue room at Wright-Patterson? Open it up. Is there a blue room at Battelle Memorial Institute? Open it up. Why did Battelle Memorial Institute make the nanothermite cutter charges like the ones that were potentially used in the World Trade Centers to bring them down? Does Battelle know anything more about where that thermite came from or who manufactured it? All these questions need to be investigated and exposed. Step number 7, declassify and expose all the illegal UFO programs and hand over the evidence to the public so that, these programs and this technology cannot be used against us for the next, deep event, because COVID was bad enough. All right. Using that technology that nobody knew about against us. Step 8, legalize all drugs. We need to, with all the cartels and stuff that poured across the border, all the problems that the drug war has caused, the CIA's, involvement in all that, and everything that's happened. We got RFK in now. He knows full well what the problems of how we deal with the drug problem is so much worse than the drug problem itself. There's treatments, there's other solutions. Community is basically created this community where these people go to prison. You get out of prison, you can't get a job, so the only way to make money is to sell drugs and join a gang or vice. And so that we've created this whole culture of drugs and gangs, all based on the war on drugs, which has been a complete and epic failure. It's over. It's done. I mean, you go to the dispensary down the street and buy a bag of marijuana, and stuff that would have sent me to jail, 20, 30 years ago. It would be completely legal to have that. And it's still illegal under federal law. According to the federal law, they haven't, Kamala Harris ran on the promise of, you elect me president, I'm going to lift the whole FDEA ban and the federal ban on marijuana. You're vice president now. Why don't you do that before you leave? Why doesn't Joe Biden step down and grant you the presidency so that we can have the first black woman president, for Christ's sake? We don't have to wait till you get elected. You can just step down and give you the position right now. Come on now. And you can change all these things that you promised to do when you were president. You can change them right now before Trump gets in. Instead of starting World War III with to hold on to the war in the Ukraine that you guys are, your money laundering operation you got going on over there. So yeah, the whole CIA, their main source of income is going to get shut off, and the drug cartels which poured into this country. How do we, shut off their source of income? You legalize all drugs, and that's going to get rid of the gang and the drug problem right there, and clean it up. And we need court and prison reform while we're at it. We created all these extra courts and extra prisons to deal with, this stupid, idiotic response to how we're going to deal with drugs. Well, maybe our courts and our prisons and the way we deal with other situations is really stupid and idiotic and barbaric and really primitive and doesn't do the best thing for society and for rehabilitation and criminals. There's no such thing as rehabilitation. Instead of, the crime training centers that we currently have, calling them correctional facilities, they should actually correct something. They've never corrected anything in their history. They've only created more drugs, more problems, more gangs. Judges and DAs, who are the people in charge of these institutions, who think that they're doing this Law and Order. They watch Law and Order, and they think that they're doing this great job for justice and keeping the everyone safe and whatnot. They all need to spend a month in the jails that they govern over. They all need to go there and spend a month there and talk to the people and learn what they're doing, what is really going on with their actions, what they're really creating. They can understand. They're not helping. What they're doing is just fucking up society worse and making such, bad people in bad circumstances into just horrible monsters, so that they can feed their court machine, and they can justify their own reason to have a job. It's disgusting. It's sick. They're depraved, and that's one of the main reasons why I voted for convicted felon Donald Trump instead of District Attorney Kamala Harris, because those people need to go to jail. They need to go to prison. They need to understand and what they're doing and what everything is about. Step 10, closing all the departments like the Department of Education. Yeah, we've talked about that. It's a complete total failure, along with a whole bunch of these other departments, which are useless, stupid, irrelevant. Department of Homeland Security. There's so many of these departments that should just all be shut down and closed. It would save tons of money and just efficiency and waste across the board. These people do nothing. FEMA needs to all be cleaned up, and a whole bunch of these other agencies. Abolish the IRS and the Federal Reserve and replace it with sound money and a sound, way to. We have the technology now. We have Bitcoin. We have Doge. We have the ability to replace all that crappy, old, stupid infrastructure that's run by 19 banking families that control literally everything, and we owe trillions of dollars in debt to that we'll never pay back now, because the interest on it has just grown higher than what we make. It's we need to put the brakes on the train, guys. Yeah, and then step number 12, the Make America Healthy Again thing. We need to do all the things that these people are afraid RFK is going to do, that he's talked about doing. RFK gets in, and we need to hold the people accountable that censored and silenced social media, silenced YouTube and other platforms, and withheld voices from reaching the public. Man, this all needs to go down. I think that a great way this would happen is if we all need to really rock the boat on this, come forward and it's time. We need to hold the government's feet to the fire and say that if they don't do this, and if they don't go through with this, we're going to we're going to shut it down. We're going to shut down the entire system, and we're going to throw ourselves on the gears of the machine and prevent the machine and the system from working entirely. In any case, thank you all for watching. It's been a wonderful 2 hours of pure fire. And if we're going to stop the engines of the world and turn heaven and hell over to bring disclosure, and it's going down. It's happening. This is the year. This is the time. 2025. We're all prepped, man. This is fire, and I will be there leading the charge with all you all behind me, by my side, wherever you guys want to stand, lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. Thank you, guys. Let's take down these fake leaders that we have in Congress and at these fake UFO congressional hearings. Let's get real information, real science, and we're in this for ourselves, man. We are the government. We are the media. We are the scientists. It's us. It's up to us. We're the adults in the room now, and we're taking over. And may the force be with you guys, all you guys. Love you, brothers. Thank you all, and keep sharing information. Keep talking about this openly, because the more openly you talk about it, unashamedly, when these people come on here and call you crazy and say that you've lost it, say that you sound nuts or you sound absolutely insane. This is the conversation that needs to be had at Thanksgiving dinner, and make people uncomfortable. It's time. Thank you. Thank you all.